In the Kenyan village of Nimware, Neoloca's package has been going nowhere. But as Watson Strogarts predict, just a single link can make a big difference. Neoloca's Aunt Margaret has come from Nairobi for a visit. She's the link to the outside world.
Like to meet Margaret.
Welcome. Come in.
I've come to take your package.
Thank you. I don't know anybody in Boston. I don't even know this Mark Vidal. But I know somebody in New York. I know a lady called Didi Halleck.
Hello, ma'am. It's express package from Kenya.
From Kenya? Oh, it must be Margaret. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Oh, I'll have to open it. I was in Kenya last summer working with Margaret Owino. I don't know any scientists in Boston, but I do know Lee Min Mo, who lives in Cambridge, and she's an old friend, and I thought, her husband's some kind of scientist. I thought maybe if I send it to Lee Min, she would also be able to somehow connect.
A key part of the small world phenomenon, the 6 degrees effect, is that all of us know someone who has moved away and has now forged a link between us and geographically distant communities. They are shrinking not only their own connections, but all their neighborhoods and all the neighborhoods of neighborhoods. That random connection is bringing the whole world together, and it's happening all across the world with everybody.
Watson Strogarts had a theory, but now they needed to prove it by studying real networks. The problem was, no one had thought it worth mapping any, except one. We don't normally associate Hollywood with the real world, but for the scientists it offered the first possibility of testing their ideas. More than 1 million actors have worked in Hollywood on 500,000 films. Here was a huge network of connections. In the mid-90s, some college students devised a trivia game based around the idea of linking every actor to just one star.
Kevin Bacon. Rodney Dangerfield was in Caddyshack with Bill Murray, and Bill Murray was in She's Having a Baby with Kevin Bacon.
Back then, Brett Chaden was a computer student with too much time on his hands, and he thought it would be fun to turn the Kevin Bacon game into a website.
Welcome to the Oracle of Bacon at Virginia website.
I wrote a program that would extract the path from every actor or actress to Kevin Bacon. Before I knew it, a lot of people were visiting, and a couple of the websites picked up on it and made it their pick of the week or whatever, and that brought in a tremendous number of visitors.
Abbott and Costello.
Brett Chaden helped turn Kevin Bacon into a cult figure and the inspiration for a major scientific breakthrough.
With Kevin Bacon.
We had this silly idea, in a way, why don't we use the Kevin Bacon network, the Hollywood actor network? Because people kept saying to us when we would talk about 6 degrees that, oh yeah, that's the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon game that everyone was playing at that time. But we thought, well, actually, it's a scientifically serious thing.
So we wrote to Brett and said, look, we're doing research on networks, and we think that you have this really interesting data, and would you mind if we had it?
Always well dressed. And to their astonishment, the Hollywood network conformed precisely to the theory. A few random links shrunk the connections between 1 million actors.
The model worked almost perfectly. There was an incredibly high level of clustering. But it was also the case that everyone could reach everyone through just a few steps.
Hey, I am the center of the universe.
Kevin Bacon, great as an actor as he is, was not that special in the role that he played in the network. That is, if you looked at any 2 actors, the typical number of steps between them, people you've never heard of, was about somewhere between 3 and 4.
Without even knowing it, Kevin Bacon had inspired the first real evidence that small worlds existed.
Can I write a check for this?
I just need to see some ID.
Hold that thought.
Eunice, hi.
Come on. Okay, so I was in a movie with an
The Oracle of Kevin Bacon was a social network entirely based on human connections.
You recently removed the appendix of him who dumped you sophomore year. So you see, we're practically brothers.
But to prove their theory was universal, Watts and Strogaerts needed to find small worlds in networks without people.
Tests have proven the great power system ready for transmission.
Here was the perfect example to test their theory. America's massive power grid, with enough high-voltage cables to reach the moon.
It's been described as the world's largest machine. So it was a kind of an organism that grew itself.
The grid is the result of thousands of random events, as new generators and cables were added to meet the growing demands of America's industry and population.
We found that it too was a small world, that even though it had 5,000 power plants over half a continent of area, it only took a very few hops to get from any one to any other.
We thought, okay, let's be ambitious here. Let's think about, completely different kinds of networks.
I had heard that every neuron in your brain is just a few synapses away from every other neuron. But we were now in a position to be able to prove that that really was right.
There is only one nervous system that has been fully mapped, the nervous system of a worm, called C. elegans.
And that, we found, was a small world also.
We found the same kind of result, short path lengths, high clustering.
It was like time to uncork the champagne for both of us. It was very, very thrilling.
They'd uncovered the invisible links that make the big world small. Watts and Strogaerts showed us a new view of the world in which distance vanishes. What goes around comes around faster than you think. Tokyo photographer Kenji Maeji is the second link in a chain. He's received a package from Australia and, paradoxically, he plans to send it back in order to get it closer to Boston.
I don't think it would be easy, but I decided to send it to my eldest brother. His name is Nobuyoshi. He lives in Brisbane. He's a scientist, so I figured he'd know a lot more scientific people than I would, and he's got a lot of contacts in the United States as well. Hey, got to say.
Most of our packages are on their way. In Germany, Jessica is following the progress of her package online. But many of the other chains are already broken. In Paris, the dancer Nadia is on vacation, and her friend has found the package has come back from Boston unopened.
This is not this letter. It gets returned, so I guess it didn't make it.
From 40 original starting points, 27 packages are still on their way somewhere, even crossing paths as they pass through the giant sorting hubs of the courier companies. And it's the significance of hubs that would be the next big discovery in network science. While Strogaerts and Watts were pioneering small worlds, another scientist would look at the problem from a different angle. For Hungarian physicist Laszlo Barabashi, understanding networks held the promise of predicting the future. His inspiration came from a classic work of science fiction, Isaac Asimov's Foundation.
I have said the empire will lie in ruins within the next century.
Asimov's Foundation centers on a mathematician with the ability to predict the future. But Barabashi had identified a flaw in the story.
I started thinking, what is that I could do to predict the future? I realized that what is missing from Asimov's thinking is the network, the structure and the behavior of the network. Because events are never isolated. They depend on each other. They interact with each other. So we need to understand how they interact.
To understand these interactions, Barabashi needed a network that had been thoroughly mapped.
The major problem was that the data was incredibly difficult to find.
His great luck came in the early 1990s. The World Wide Web was exploding in popularity. Here was a huge network he could map by tracing the links between web pages. No one directed the growth of the web. Anyone could put up a site and link to wherever they liked, so the expectation was that the structure would be entirely random.
If the World Wide Web to be a random network, then the distribution of the links follows a bell curve. I would find something similar to this.
In a bell curve, there are few extremes. Most web pages would be grouped in the middle, having the same number of links. But what he found was different. The web links were not evenly spread. Most pages had very few, but there were some with a huge number of connections.
We found a few web pages that had thousands of links pointing to them. And these were the hubs.
It was completely new, completely unexpected. First, we did not know what to do with that.
This was no random world. It seemed to have an organizing principle based around hubs. In these early days of the web, long before the familiar supersites of today had emerged, Barabashi's study had glimpsed the future.
It predicted the potential for the existence of huge hubs, like Amazon and Google and Yahoo turned out to be.
Barabashi's hunch was that behind this pattern there may be a deeper truth lurking. By coincidence, Watts had just published his paper on the small world of Hollywood actors. Barabashi wondered if there could be hubs there too.
I got an email from Laszlo Barabasi, and he said, would I mind sharing some of the data? So we took the data set and we interpreted just like the World Wide Web, as a map. And we asked the question, how many links each actor has? We saw exactly the same pattern as we observed earlier on the World Wide Web. There were many actors that had only a few links to other actors. There were a few major hubs, however.
Though it was there, right in front of them, Watts and Strogatz had missed a second great discovery.
The funny thing is, we didn't really look. And so we had all this data looking, staring us in the face, and I never thought to actually plot the distribution.
Finding hubs in Hollywood was a major breakthrough. It suggested that networks didn't just grow accidentally, they evolved according to some pattern. If so, hubs should be everywhere. And sure enough, when he looked, Barabashi found hub networks in transportation routes, in computer chips, and within the human cell.
I kept thinking, how is it possible? Because they cannot be more different in the scope, in the mate, and their nature. More I thought about it, more I realized that there must be a simple explanation for that, because these are such a different systems that the only way they could be similar to each other is that there is one simple law that describes the structure of all of them.
And he discovered that simple equation that describes our complex, interconnected world.
pk equal k to the minus gamma. That is the formula.
Here was the secret behind almost every network, the structure that nature uses to spin its webs. And once it could be seen, it revealed networks have peculiar strengths and weaknesses, with implications for all of us.
There are hundreds and thousands and potentially millions of errors in my cell, and yet I don't even notice. The internet can work even when hundreds of its routers are not functional. If you remove the small nodes, it does not matter. The network will shrink, but will not fall apart. But there is a price you pay for this extreme robustness. If you remove the hubs, the system will fall apart.
We live in a connected world. Networks dominate our economy, our environment, and our society. And yet we barely notice their presence unless things go wrong. Watson Barabashi had revealed the hidden world behind networks. They had become hubs themselves. Their studies now those most often referred to by other scientists as researchers from many disciplines explore the power of 6 degrees. Society has its hubs too. People who are much more connected than the rest of us. German lawyer Philip Thomas is one of them, and it's made him the obvious target for someone sending a package from Burma.
I dabble in areas such as being a German lawyer, being a journalist, writing for a German insurance magazine, being an insurance broker, being a consultant, doing a bit of real estate work, sitting on the board of an insurance company in Fiji. Well, the one who sent the package to me is Michael Nyund, an old friend from Burma. He's actually Australian Burmese. Burma is a fairly isolated place, so Burmese, unfortunately, don't have too many contacts to the outside world. Michael knows that I have family spread in the US, so it must have been pretty obvious for Michael that I might be one potential link in that chain. Dass ich Ihnen das einfach so überlassen darf. Danke.
Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen.
Through random links or hubs, the world is made small, allowing everything to travel far and fast on the network. This can be good news or totally devastating. It depends, of course, on what's spreading on the network.